Hello folks, this is lesson 5 in our memory scheme of work, and we're looking at the working model of memory. Okay, so what we have here is an image that shows us something about the brain. What do you think it is? Spend a couple of minutes, just try and work out what you think that is showing us. Okay, so it's it's 4 different MRIs, and they are basically showing us where different levels of activity are when different things are happening in the brain. Okay, so when we're seeing words, we have the activity at the back in the occipital lobe. When we're hearing words, we've got more activity around the bronchial and Wernicke's area, and when we're thinking about them particularly, we see it more in the prefrontal cortex. So that's really quite interesting. It shows us a few things as well about the brain which we haven't necessarily thought of. What I want to do is I want you to get a buddy. So if you've got a sibling or someone who is close to you, I want you to play pat a cake. Okay, so pat a cake is basically when you put your hands against another person and you do that sort of pat a cake, baker's man, or you're doing a sailor went to CCC, that sort of thing. So you can see the guys doing it in the photo there. And what I want you to do is I want you to explain the multi-store model of memory at the same time. Okay, so it doesn't matter who you get as your partner, just do that and run through that. Okay, that'd be brilliant. Okay, hopefully you were able to do that fairly well. Covered the multi-store model of memory just recently, so it should be fairly fresh in your mind. Let's do something else now. What I'd like to do is I'd like you to get up two, either you can get 2 YouTube videos, or you can get up, get 2 different Wikipedia pages up. And what we want to do is we want to have basically one person sat either side of us, and they read the information from one Wikipedia page, let's say about turtles, and the second one, and let's say about Kim Kardashian. Okay, and one of them reads one page and one of them reads the other. They read it to you both at the same time, and then when they finish that sort of top chunk, you then write down as much as you can recall. Okay, if you don't have anyone else around you who can take part in this, what I'd like to do is I'd like to listen to 2 different YouTube videos at the same time. Okay, so get them on 2 different subjects, 2 different things completely. Again, doesn't matter what. Could be on turtles and Kim Kardashian. That'd be fine. But the point is 2 completely different subjects. Okay, I want you to try and listen to them at the same time, and then try and recall as much as you can. Okay, so please have a go at that now. Okay, so hopefully you found that really hard, and when you tried to recall the information, you actually really struggled, because to be honest, most people do. And there's 2 points I want to make here. Firstly, that you can't process more than one stream of one type of information in your brain at a time, but you can process 2 streams of information if they're different types of information. So in this case, playing pat a cake, you've got the visual spatial movement, and playing and explaining the multi-store model memory, you've got that spoken auditory element. So you're able to do both of those things at the same time. But when it comes to listening to 2 different videos or 2 different people talking to you, actually you have a very difficult, very limited level of success. And what you end up doing is you end up switching your attention between the two. And so you don't really get that much. And as such, it's not really very successful. Second point here, this is why you should listen to teachers in lesson, and you shouldn't be having a conversation with your friend, because you can only process one stream of auditory information at a time. So yeah, just heads up now. Anyway, so let's get into the main model. Okay, so the main model for this is the working memory model by Baddeley and Hitch. And what it is it's an improved model for how we do our short-term memory, because our short-term memory is basically a model which doesn't, well, it's based on the multi-store model memory, and it doesn't really cover what we need to know about short-term memory. Because, for instance, it says it solves problems, but how? Well, the working memory model, in theory, claims to tell us how. We also have this fact that, according to the short-term memory, we shouldn't be able to process two streams of information. So we shouldn't be able to do the pat cake task. We shouldn't be able to walk down the street having a conversation on our phone. Instead, we should only be able to do one thing at once. But we can't. We can do two things as long as the information is different. So that means the theory must be wrong, which means the theory needs improving, and that is what the working model of memory, don't know my words are today, need another cup of tea clearly. That is why the working model of memory by Baddeley and Hitch is an improvement for short-term memory. So when you look at it, I want you to think about it and say, this is basically pulling out the short-term memory from the multi-store model memory, throwing it away and replacing it with working memory. Okay, so short-term, sayonara, welcome, working memory. And it's kind of like zoomed in now onto that. And we're going to understand, hopefully, that store, the working memory store, compared to that. Now, I've got a basic model which I'm showing you here. Okay, now the simple fact is that actually there's multiple models of the working memory, because they haven't just published one theory, but they've updated it over time. Now I'm going to start off by telling you about the most basic level, because A, the exam board don't say which one you have to know, and B, by teaching the basic one and then giving you some updates to it, I can help you also have an evaluation point about it having to be updated. But I can also show you what's why psychology is a science and why we update our theories. Yeah. So it starts off all with the central executive. This is kind of the main system. This tells us exactly what is going on in our brain and where we need to put things. Okay, so it solves problems and it allocates information to the relevant process. Now, particularly, it judges it based upon the type of information it is. So if it is auditory information, think of your phone, yeah? Phone made originally for phone calls, which is a spoken conversation, an auditory conversation. So therefore we have the phonological loop, and that is our main store for auditory information. It has two subsystems which come off there, which are the articulatory process or articulatory control process and the phonological store. Okay, now those are subsystems of the phonological loop. In the textbook they used a rather unfortunate term, which is not really very woke, of slave systems, which has been updated. So it's kind of better to use subsystems and slave systems. So that's why I tend to use that one instead. So the articulatory process or articulatory control process we can refer to as the inner voice. This is where we form up our verbal responses. Yeah. Whereas the phonological store is like our inner ear, and that is where we process and store auditory information, where we hear things and work out what it means. And then secondly, we have the visual spatial sketchpad, or as the Americans call it, scratchpad. Point out, Baddeley was and is a British psychologist, not an American. Okay, so Alan Baddeley, British psychologist, published his theory in Britain, but when it gets published over in America, they change it to be more American-friendly words, and so we end up with Scratchpad for American published versions. So we do see some differences around this model. But we're in the UK, so we'll call it Scratchpad. Okay, right. So visual spatial Scratchpad is where we hold our visual information, so anything that we see, so you can see the screen right now, but also your spatial information, so knowing how far the screen is from you, being able to move around in the space in your room. Those are things which are connected with your spatial awareness. Yeah, and visual and spatial information is often so interlinked that they say actually it's processed in the same system. So that was the original theory. The original theory just had those key elements. But in 2000, they realized that they'd missed something out. And basically, we no longer had the ability to dance. Cue me normally doing a dance move in the front of the classroom. And sorry, you're missing that. But simply put, dancing requires you to be able to process phonological information and visual and spatial information all together. And you can't do that according to the original model. So along comes the episodic buffer. Now the episodic buffer is used to basically have overflow from either the phonological loop or visual spatial sketchpad, but also to enable us to process information which cannot be separated out for one or the other, visual or phonological, i.e. dancing. Okay, so that comes in there. So there's also, as we do updates, we also see they start breaking down the visual spatial sketchpad or sketchpad into the visual cache, for instance, and we need to kind of recognize that there is multiple versions of this theory. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like you to go through, I'd like you to use the textbook page 52 to 53, and I'd like you to make notes on the theory. I'd also like you to make sure you've drawn a copy of the model, but I also want to draw your attention particularly to the fact that they have a drawing of the model on page 52. I don't like it. The reason why I don't like it is because if you aren't careful, you might mistakenly think that long-term memory is part of this model. Okay, if you look at that visual, if you look at the visualization there, you will see that they have a kind of image of that model, and it kind of links all the phonological loop, episodic buffer, and the visual spatial sketchpad to long-term memory. And it's right to say that all three of those processes can transfer information into long-term memory and record it from there. But it is not saying that long-term memory is part of this theory. Okay, please remember that. The part that is this theory kind of stops with the phonological loop, episodic buffer, and visual spatial sketchpad. according to that drawing. Okay, so just be careful of that drawing. It's a bit misleading. It's one of the things that people don't like about this one so much. Okay, this textbook so much. So just be careful with that. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through and make the notes using page 52, which if you've not got the textbook, I will have pasted a PDF of the textbook online for you. I've made that up already. Okay, so I'll add those to my website now as well. Please have a go. Okay, let's have a look at a scenario. Okay, this scenario is one which we could have. So an experiment was carried out to investigate the working memory model. One group of participants was asked to carry out 2 visual tasks at the same time, and a different group of participants were asked to carry out a visual task and a verbal task at the same time. The results showed that participants who carried out 2 visual tasks at the same time performed less well on the tasks than participants who carried out a visual and a verbal task at the same time, using your knowledge of the working memory model to explain these findings. Okay, so what I like to think through, and I want you to think before you write, okay? I want you to think through why that might be. What's the key points in that scenario that you need to pick out? What's the key points in the theory that you need to reference? Yeah, why can you do 2 tasks better when one of them is visual and one of them is phonological compared to both of them being phonological, I think it was. Yeah. Okay. And I'll just go through the tips for answering these the questions for scenarios. Okay. So read the scenario, then the question, and then again reread the scenario. So picking out those key points. They are testing your understanding, so you need to explain things fully to get the marks. Okay. So you need to refer to the scenario in your answer as well. Okay, you can't just refer to the theory. You've got to refer to the experiment in this occasion. Okay, so some people like to use kind of that Peel format for that. That's absolutely fine. It's not essential, but you can use that if you so wish. Okay. So please have a go at that question now and place your answer on your Google Doc. Okay, so you can now have a look at this model answer for it, okay? And I want you to now mark your answer so I can see what you're thinking, okay? Right, so you get 1 mark for correctly saying it's because the working model of memory deals with auditory and visual information separately. So if you identify that as a factor, you gain 1 mark for that. You gain 1 mark for relating it to the scenario and 1 mark for explaining why the working memory model is relevant to the understanding of the scenario. So let's look at this model answer. Okay, the working memory model is able to deal with different information in different areas of the brain. The visual goes to the visual spatial sketchpad and the auditory goes to the phonological loop. That's my first mark kind of under the belt. Yeah. In the experiment, the second group has no problem as the information is going to 2 different areas of the brain, while the first group struggles as they are overloading the visual spatial sketchpad. Therefore, because of the way the working memory model splits up the types of information, it can easily explain the results of the study. So you see in that sort of second paragraph, I'm relating the theory quite specifically to the experiment, and then I'm explaining why it's an issue in that last point. So that would get 3 points for that model answer. Okay, so can you now go through and mark your answer and write what you think you did well, what you think you need to improve on as well as giving yourself a mark. Okay, if you can do that in purple, that would be brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you have not got everything down as you want to yet, you want to maybe cover the functions a little bit more, then this table can be really quite useful to you. Okay, so if you're looking for an extra way of doing that, then actually it can just make it a little bit easier to kind of get into your notes, rather than having like a continuous sheet after sheet of just written out. Using some tables, using things to break it up can make it easier for you. Okay, so just have a look at that if you wish to try and break up your notes a little bit. Okay, so let's go through and whiz through some of the criticisms. So first of all, it does explain how we deal with different types of information. So that's a strength of the model. We also have that it suggests specific areas solve problems in the form of the central executive, and that was a problem in the short-term memory. Yeah, we didn't know how it solved that. Hang on, we didn't know how it solved it. The central executive solves it, but how does the central executive solve it? Have they just fobbed us off with telling us where it solves it, not how it solves it? I think they have. I think once again we have failed to actually explain how, and instead given a where. We can, however, and do you remember me mentioning the case of KF? Yeah, remember KF can see? So he had the ability to process visual information, but not auditory information. So remember, it criticizes the multi-store model of memory in the fact that actually he should be able to have both of them or neither. And yet with the multi-store model of memory, while it doesn't work there, it does work for the working memory model. So because we got those separate Visual Spatial Sketchpad and that separate phonological loop, we can argue that that's why KF is able to do one type of information processing but not the other, and therefore it supports the working memory model and rejects the multi-store model, which kind of gives us that really nice benefit there. Okay, and then Baddeley. Okay, Baddeley's come back, but you'll find there's quite a bit of Baddeley's done stuff in this. You know what I mean. So first of all, he is the person who came up with the dual processing task, and that's what you did earlier, yeah, where you had to play pat a cake and recite about the working memory model, and where you had to try and do the dichotic listening, which is when you're trying to listen to two different pieces of information and then pay attention to both of them. Can't be done. So he came up with those, and he says that dual processing tasks again support the idea they're separate stores, and explains why you can handle only one type of one set of information at a time, i.e. just visual or just phonological. We can't deal with two types of visual, two types of phonological. We can deal with visual and phonological, but we can't deal with two types of just one of them, i.e. visual. So he says this is why you can handle only one set of information at a time when it's only one type, but can handle more when it's different types of information. Let's look at a few criticisms though. Oh no, we've got Braver et al. Oh, and Braver actually is a study which is really important, and we'll come back to it later on in the course as well. So definitely make a note about what Braver did. He, using BrainScan, actually finds in the brain that the central executive is located in the prefrontal cortex. So that's the front part of your brain, and that's a multiple use study. So it's what I refer to as a useful study. Later on, of course, we have a few more useful studies, ones you can use in more than one area. And then we have super usefuls, ones which are just like so useful in so many different areas. It's just like you should know them off by heart. Yeah. So Braver is a useful study to know. It doesn't explain how the central executive solves problems. That was what I was kind of alluding to earlier. It says where, but it doesn't actually say how. They also had to update it with a fairly fundamental element, the epsilon buffer, and it took them 25 blooming years. 25 years. Who's to say it's complete now if it took them 25 years to find it? If not funny, if you're in a restaurant and you ordered, you know, a cooked breakfast and it arrived and it's missing, you know, the sausage, would you be happy if they took 25 years to bring you your sausage? No, you wouldn't be. That's rubbish service. So you're not going to be happy with that if it's a breakfast. So why would we be happy with it if it's a psychological theory? Yeah. What's to say it's now complete? It still also does not explain how each section does what it said. Okay, so again, what this theory has done is told us elements and facts about it, but it doesn't really tell us how it does these things. And that is annoying, and that is a problem for us. Okay, and then even Baddeley, yeah, Alan Baddeley, the guy who is in charge of this, who created it and used loads of research and who carried on with a, you know, a very long career, still going. Even he admits that the central executive is the most important part of the working memory model, and ultimately the part we know least about. Let's say it again. It's the part we know least about, which is not really very good, is it? They're basically giving us half a theory again. So again, we come into this all sort of joyful about the, you know, the benefits of developing a deeper understanding of what really happens in our short-term memory, and we've come out once more kind of a bit cheesed off because they haven't really told us how. All they've done is they told us the where. Okay, so what I like to do is, using textbooks, using the points I've just gone through, I'd like you to make sure you've done 4 Peel criticisms. So remember, you start off by saying a clear point. So is it a support? Is it a criticism? Is it a strength? Is it a weakness? Then you make a clear point which could stand up on its own as to whether it's an issue. So we then go on and give an example. That's when we kind of back up our claim, and then we explain why our example backs up our point. Then at the end we link it back. Okay, please have a go at that now. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it there today. Okay, but I'm going to leave you with a 6-mark question to do, which is nice and simple. It's a straight 6-mark description question. So when I say 6 marks, you say, oh, 175 words. And I want you to answer the question, outline the working memory model. Okay, nice, simple, straightforward question there. Outline the working memory model. Make sure you cover all the key parts and you place it on your Google Doc. Okay, right. I will see you next time, folks, and I hope that's made sense. Thank you very much.